Hello, bot fans, and welcome to another edition of Red Square, Blue Square, your go-to for BattleBots recap and reaction. I'm your host, as always, Richard Tiemann, and this is episode number 7, recapping episode 8 of BattleBots, and we've got 2 first-timers on the show. So we had 2 women for the first time a couple weeks ago, and now 2 that have never been in the Red Square and Blue Square. Well, I mean, in the BattleBox, but on the show, and so I'm so excited to have them. It was a great fight card once again, but before we get too far into it, got to have our head referee, John, hit you with a warning. John?
Warning, this episode is full of spoilers, so you've been warned.
Perfect. All right. You know how it works. If you haven't seen the episode, stop, collaborate and listen, hammer time, in the name of love, whatever you got to do, and go watch the episode. Come right back for the rest of this awesome content, because in the Red Square, we have a man who, up until this episode, had like the best mustache in all of BattleBots, and his bot is pretty good too. Welcome for the first time, Brandon Zalinsky of P1. How you doing, Brandon?
Hey, doing pretty well. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I figured I'd restart. It was starting to get a little scraggly, so I'm starting from square one.
Well, we're happy to have you. It should be a great conversation. And in the Blue Square, his whole face is really just a thing of beauty. I mean, I don't have to tell you, he is the heartthrob of BattleBots, the captain of Hypershock, Will Bales. Welcome, Will.
Oh, you're too nice to me. How's it going?
Going pretty good, guys. So congratulations on your seasons so far. Brandon, you're one of a few teams that have done all 3 fights. And then Will, obviously, Hypershock is still in the undefeated column, looking for their 3rd and final fight. I know, fingers crossed. So we will talk about both of your guys' seasons so far, as well as the bots and the ever-looming tournament of 32. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the winners and losers. We'll throw up the fight card for you. So we had episode number 8 started off with Blacksmith, the brand new, well, I guess, revisioned hammer bot that is now officially a hammer saw, according to Zach Lytle of Scorpios. And there's a new club for those guys. They went one-on-one with Malice. In a unanimous decision, it was Malice with the win. So they get their first win of the season. Congratulations to Bunny and company. Number 2, Black Dragon versus Claw Viper. Black Dragon gets a knockout, advancing to 2-1 on the season. So both Malice and Black Dragon, their qualifying matches are done. They have had their 3 fights. Where will the judges put them, if at all? We'll see, but obviously Black Dragon has a pretty good shot at the tournament right now with 2-1. Then number 3, Smee. I am wearing a Captain Hook hat because I don't have any Smee apparel, and I don't think that many E's fits on a t-shirt, but I'm pretty sure I saw it. They have to do rows and rows and rows of E's. They went one-on-one with Gigabyte. Gigabyte gets a knockout win there. They are now 2-1. Then number 4, Hydra versus Glitch. And this, wow, a 1 in a million shot by Glitch, and it was lights out for Hydra, who is 1-2. I say again, Hydra 1-2, last year's number 1 seed. And then Glitch is now 2-0. They joined the 2-0 family. So Hydra with 1-2 in 3 fights. We'll have to see where they are placed, if at all, in the tournament. That's the big question mark. Number 5 saw Free Shipping take on Tombstone and Ray Billings, and Gary, they go the distance. How about that? So in a unanimous decision, though, it was Tombstone who moves on to 2-1. 6 saw Ribot and our own Brandon Zalinsky's P1 in a great fight. It was Ribot that got the knockout, though. They will finish their qualifiers as 3-0, where Brandon, you guys are 2-1. So congrats. You got to feel pretty good about that considering last season.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yes, very much. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So I think you guys have a good bid at 32. And that set us up for the main event, a match that everybody wanted to see. And blink and you missed it. So I'm salivating at the idea of a rematch between these 2 bots. Sawblaze versus Endgame. Endgame gets a knockout via out of the arena, which they just had a package on during this episode talking about how that wasn't supposed to happen, but this is the 3rd time it's happened this season, right, Will Bales?
Yeah.
So we have 12 undefeated teams because there were 2 that got eliminated from the undefeated column. However, with Glitch's win, they are now 2-0, so they get added. So we lose 2, we get 1. That makes 12 instead of 13. But man, of the undefeateds, there are only 2 right now that are 3-0. Endgame and Ribot. Who saw that coming? Brandon, obviously, you guys had a pretty good slate of matches with Valkyrie and then finishing up with Ribot. I mean, overall, how do you feel your qualifiers went, and where would you put P1 in the 32?
Yeah, I thought we were I thought we were really fortunate for a number of reasons, and chief among them, just something that you never see on screen is the pushes in the pits and what happens between fights. There were 4 fight night filming days, and we were fortunate enough to have our fights on, and there's a break between 2 and 3, but we were fortunate enough to have our 3 fights on days 1, 2, and 3, which was awesome because we were ready at the beginning. We got our first fight in, our fight against Valkyrie, day 1. We were the last fight in day 1, and if we had pushed it off to the second day, we would have pushed our whole schedule back. We were able to get that fight in. We got the Jaeger fight in. Then we had a nice long break to fix all of our remaining damage from Valkyrie, and then get our Ribot fight in on that 3rd day. It was, that part of it was awesome, and that part of it we felt really, really great about, because then we had time after the fact to get ready for whatever would come next. So it was, that part of it we felt awesome about. As far as seeding schedule, we really kind of knew with the win over Valkyrie. Valkyrie's now 1-1 canonically. So we knew that they were gonna be, I mean, they were the most destructive robot in 2020. So we knew that they had cachet, and the win over them would propel us far. So that plus another win, we were really confident about it. I thought we'd be between 10 and 20 was my guess. So that's how I kind of felt.
Yeah, the top 8, at least in my opinion, is pretty easy, because I said this on the last episode that I know that it's more that goes into it. But in all honesty, if you beat all the bots that they put you in there with, if there's 8 undefeated bots, put them in the 8 top seeds. However you order that, I mean, it's subject to whoever, but we saw a few undefeated bots that were not in that top 8, and it kind of was a head scratcher. But obviously for you, Will, I mean, this is a whole new look Hypershock, and congrats on the toy again. But you guys are riding momentum, much like Brandon and P1 this season, with 1 fight left. How much is the pressure on after you watched that main event fight between Jameson Go and the guys in Endgame?
Oh man, yeah, that was, I think everyone across the board wanted that to go a little bit longer than 7 seconds. So
You think?
Jameson included. Yeah, interesting to see how out of Uda's have been handled so far, or lack thereof, and I'm curious to see what happens for next year. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'd much rather get torn to pieces than get kicked out of the arena. I'd rather have that little extra chance to make up for a win, or at least get a little bit more airtime and show a better fight. So I feel bad when I legitimately felt bad when we knocked Lockjaw out. I was really nervous because at the time it was the first person to do it. Hydra versus Gruff was immediately after that fight in real time. So we had no idea what was going to happen. I was totally expecting someone to come over and say, "I'm really sorry, but we have to disqualify you." So that was a relief. It's a good start to the season. We only have 2 fights in, so there's still plenty of little things that could start to rear their ugly heads. Less than 33 minutes of fight time, really. So we're feeling good, and things are going well. We're at this time in the event, we're like halfway through getting the second robot ready, which we've never really done before. So we felt really on the ball, which is unusual for us. Brandon can attest to that.
Well, you guys have done very well this season, both of you. And Brandon, for you, now that your qualifiers are done, you look back on any of those, and you were 2-0 going into that last one, and it was, you have this unbelievable fight against Valkyrie. You guys drive phenomenally against Jaeger, and then you have this Ribot, who is just as hot as you guys are going into that fight. Is there anything that you guys would have or could have done differently?
I mean, first off, both of us were 2-0. We both knew that we were going to have a pretty decent shot of making the 32, no matter which way this fight went. So we were just like, can we make this as just great a fight as we possibly can? So that's why we ended up running what we ran. He ran the vert, which I expected him to. And so we tried that new split wedge thing. And watching the fight back, it definitely feels better for us, at least on TV, than it did when it happened. Watching the fight, I was like, man, we actually kind of had it. Well, we didn't have it, but we held our own for about a minute and a half until the wedge blew apart. So the kind of looking back on it, it was, I would still run the split wedge. I would still do the same configuration that we did, because I think we got those like horn locks where we'd get our forks locked in their forks, which is what we were going for. And we got all those that we were looking for. It was just, I would back up even further. There was a mistake made with, I don't even know if it was that specific configuration, but we ended up this year like 10 to 14 pounds under what I thought we were going to be, which I will take 1,000 times over the other way. But it ended up that we made concessions on that configuration specifically that I wish we hadn't made. Like those front plates are way thinner than on the plow that we used against Valkyrie, and in reality they just didn't need to be. So I think if I had to do something over again, it would have been back up even further to design stage and figure out however the heck our weight got so messed up, and design those a little bit more strong.
Tough for sure, but overall great regular season qualifiers for you guys, finishing 2-1, and should definitely have a strong argument to be in the 32. I mean, if you look at the field and how many bots there are in the competition as a whole, I mean, really it's really hard for there to be more than 32 with winning records, considering everything that's gone on. So I'd say if you have a winning record, you're in. If you're undefeated, you have a top spot, and then however the tiebreakers are. But it's going to be the 1 and 2s and even some 0 and 3s, because as we've seen with Tombstone and Mammoth, there can be a double knockout, but somebody has to get the victory. There cannot be any ties, and we talked about ties last week and how, as much as you love that there aren't any in this sport, you kind of miss them in moments that decide who's in and who's out, and that could be a thing. But then also you saw Sawblaze and Endgame, and I think Hydra and Glitch were a couple others that, when you look at their records and then you look at them, it's a tale of two different stories. All right, so Will, you guys have one fight left. You're 2-0, and everybody's going to be talking about the pressure. But honestly, even with a loss, this season has to go down as one of, I'm assuming, your favorites, just because of how well everything went and the opponents you fought, the win over Lockjaw. But what are you feeling going into your third and final fight? What would 3-0 mean, and what would 2-1 mean?
We'd certainly be happy with 2-1. We always feel like we're behind the 8 ball and never quite on it. And this year is the first year where that's all different. Yes, we built the robot on site per tradition, but it was working. And I don't know if it was luck or skill or or a combination of the two, but things are working really well. And so the first fight, we found some little nitty-gritty things here and there, like the slip clutch on the weapon drive unscrewed all of a sudden. That's why the weapon stopped, because it turned into a brake instead of a clutch. And so we fixed that. And then Lockjaw tore some wheels off, but we're fine losing wheels. And things were holding up despite some solid hits from Lockjaw. So we're gaining some confidence, feeling like, okay, this is working pretty good. The weapon was running at the end of the match. The drivetrain was working at the end of the match, despite losing 2 wheels. We can probably go the distance with some of these bigger, heavier, heavy hitters. So we had no idea who our third match would be or what kind of third match we'd have to expect, because we always are told you get an easy one, someone who's right at your level, and then the hard one. Well, if you beat the one that's supposed to be your hard one, do you get an easy one now, or do you get or do they just make the next one even harder because clearly that wasn't hard enough? Look at Endgame's schedule, for example. Tell me which one's the easy one on Endgame's schedule. So cautiously optimistic, I think, would sum up our general vibe at this time in the competition. Feeling good. 3-0 would be just bonkers and fantastic, but 2-1 would get us into the tournament, and that's a good first step.
Now, is this a point where you guys, and maybe Brandon, this was something for you too, considering how well your season was going, but the third and final fight, is it something where you're like, okay, so there's only a handful of undefeated bots left, and we could help, narrow that field down if you throw us an opponent that's also undefeated to see, let's give maybe a tournament preview, but also if the tournament doesn't pan out where we face each other, at least they got to see this fight. Like, Will, was there a matchup you had in mind for that third if they didn't?
I'm so hesitant to predict matchups either in the moment or after the fact, because I know like Peter Abramson or Aaron Catling is going to be listening like, oh yeah, it's a great idea, let me write that one down so these hoes next year. I think that I'm always terrified of other vertical spinners. Vertical spinners are scary things, and they hit things and they ruin stuff. Speaking as one, I can attest to that. So we'd like to avoid that as much as possible. We were curious about some horizontals, maybe Valkyrie, maybe Gigabyte, maybe not Gigabyte. How about like Shredderator or something? Something that we can kind of get a sense for how the horizontal configuration would work. Because you don't want to go into a tournament with no idea how one of the other configuration works. And we have two. It's the 2 discs and the forks, or the big wedge and the single disc. And we had no practice, no experience with the wedge, and so that was a little exciting to be able to try out, but nerve-wracking that we hadn't tried it out yet.
And Brandon, what about for you? Because obviously, your schedule up into this third and final fight wasn't, like you guys trying to get under or push around Smee or, figure out what you're supposed to do against Huge or Mammoth, as a wedge bot with the flippers. So, your third fight, you might have some ideas of who you'd like to really test your bot against, and maybe that was Ribot. But what kind of matchups were you looking for the third one?
Yeah, I thought we were getting a vertical spinner. I was almost certain we were getting a 1-1 or a 2-0 vertical spinner. And it was going to be, because you watch our 2020 and we got crushed by Copperhead, and you're like, well, can you not get crushed by a vertical spinner now? So that's basically how I was thinking. So I was looking at the schedule after our second fight, and it was looking at it as like, I think Ribot might have crossed my mind at one point, but like Witch Doctor or one of these other like 1-1 or 2-0 vertical spinners, I thought were all kind of going to be on the list for us to fight. I knew it was going to be a good robot. It wasn't going to be a pushover. That's the thing this year too, is that they're like the field of great robots is just exploding. Like you look at,
there's
5 years
only
ago,
a handful that you could point at and see like, maybe not, but you're right. The vast majority of the field is way scarier than ever before.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the best. It's the best. Every year has been the best event, and this event was no different. This was crazy impressive. And so, like I said, I expected a 2-0 or 1-1 vertical spinner, and if it was going to be a 1-1 vertical spinner, I expected it to be a vert who had lost at endgame, like Witch Doctor or something like that. So,
Will, obviously one of the more respected members of the BattleBots community as far as builders, captains that aren't considered legends. You were very vocal about some of the things that happened last season, some rules that maybe needed changed. And so people tend to rally with you to see, what can we do to make this competition better? So we've had the discussion more or less about how much weight previous seasons get put into this season. So obviously with Brandon in P1, they're 2-1. They fought their first fight against last season's most destructive bot. Who is it this season? I don't know, but last season they were the most destructive bot. So how big of a win is that? And then also their legacy name like Valkyrie, and then you have other people like you yourself who fought Don Hudson, who is a legend in the sport, but also, you know, it really depends on the year how good Lockjaw does. So where do you sit as far as, you know, when they're seeding the tournament and the committee is weighing their decisions as far as beyond the wins and losses?
I think you just started to hit on it really well. Some robots are much more consistent than others. I'd say, for example, Valkyrie's a pretty consistent robot. No matter what year it is, you can guarantee that there's going to be some, heavy hitting matches with that robot is involved. So I'd say anyone fighting them this year, yeah, good job, well done, and you earned the win, and that should be weighted highly. Other robots like Lockjaw or ourselves, for that matter, we do not have consistent years. Every other year is really great or really bad, depending on the last digit in the calendar year, it would seem. So you kind of have to wait until all the fights have played out in order to weight those matches accordingly. Hydra, for example, wouldn't have expected that Hydra is doing as poorly as they are right now, and that's really weird. But they've had really good years in the past. So what's changing? And so it's a constant fight for the selection committee and Aaron Catling, and trying to figure out what matches should happen in the first place, and then how to weight them after the fact. Honestly, I don't know how they do it. And no matter what they do, there will always be some people who are upset and some people that are really happy. So
yeah, tale as old as time. You either love the decisions or you hate the decisions. Yeah. And
more fights would help.
Yeah. I
100%.
I still couldn't believe that they were down to 3. That fourth fight, as many times as you could see about it 2-2. That fourth fight, though, that was something. It was like you had third time was the charm or whatever, but then the fourth might have been like, here it is in its glory and a decision maker. But you get 3. Yeah. So and as Brandon said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And hopefully the committee agrees with that. So now we're going to get to the portion of the show where we talk about a topic that's been brought up in the communities of robots and combat robots, and that is what the fork, like what is up with the fork. I feel like it's an epidemic happening, and somehow someone's going to find a way to blame Jake Ewert and his bike rack, because it was Zach that came on my show and said, how is it that Jake has a bike rack and gets all this shade, but yet Adam Wrigley and Shatter put on these really long forks against Blacksmith and nobody says a word. And now all we've seen are really long forks. Brandon, forks, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I sat watching the 2020 championship, the Endgame Whiplash championship, and went, well, this is next year, isn't it? So this is, I mean, and it really kind of has been. And I don't know, I personally, like, there's some degree that I like to play fork game, but I don't like to go to, like, I don't find it super fun personally to like build 18-inch long forks that are magneted and preloaded to the ground and stuff. I just don't find it as fun. Additionally, a disclaimer, they don't really work with P1 because it's a front hinge flipper. So that 2 things. Number 1, if you have forks this long, if you get somebody on the forks, you can't get them to your weapon, and my weapon can't take somebody and deliver them 14 feet in the air like Will's can. So that part of it doesn't work. Also, if P1 gets inverted and I have super long forks on, I cannot self-right the robot. So, because you flip it over this way and the forks are in the way. So I don't really like to do it all that much. But the unfortunate thing is that, I mean, you saw the spot from a couple weeks ago that they BattleBot showed, and it's totally right in that the Endgame and Sawblaze and all the teams that are right up at the top, that's the game they're playing, and Hydra too. I mean, it's just it's unavoidable to a degree, but I try to avoid it as much as I can.
All right, Will. So Beta didn't fire its primary weapon. Jake brings out a bike rack to take on Huge, and now there's 10 bots that are putting on these really long forks. What do you have to say?
Oh man, forks are a necessary evil. We didn't do it last year. We kind of saw the writing on the wall going into last year and really wanting to avoid it. We share a workshop with Witch Doctor, and both teams were complaining back and forth about how much forks suck and how they're going to kill the sport and yada yada yada, and we're not going to do it. Well, it didn't exactly work out when we didn't have forks. There are definitely some advantages to having them, and in our efforts to try to be a little bit more meta-ish in our competitiveness, we knew we needed something. And so I think like the Wednesday before filming this year, I designed some and sent them to SendCutSend to cut, and then threw them at a powder coater on Saturday before filming started, while we're like going through tech inspection. And they work great. Let me tell you, those fork things are really good when you have them. Unfortunately, everybody has them, and everyone's trying to make them just a little bit longer and longer and longer. I don't know what the solution is. It seems that they're slowly self-regulating themselves, like the first fight, Endgame versus Hydra. Thank goodness. I mean, it was awful to watch, but thank goodness both teams realized that was not a tactic that could last. But it doesn't end. The whole season is chock full of forks.
Oh, so no end in sight for the forks, but that's just the trend. We see different trends, but it looks like bot jousting is what it looks like when you see two with extended forks go out there at each other, and you just really want one of them to just catch a kill saw at the right angle, and then the other bot gets and it just wrecks the whole thing, like that 1 in a million shot we saw with Glitch on Hydra, and just how crazy that was. Like, that's what we're wanting. And what I am worried about is fans' reaction during these fights if we see more of this, because there was a fight, was it last week or the week before, that somebody was just avoiding the other bot at all costs, and the crowd started to, like, they weren't having it. You could hear booing, and you never hear booing in battle bots, but yet sure enough, there's a first time for everything, and we heard it.
Yeah, some teams forget that first and foremost, battle bots is entertainment, and at some point, forking each other is not going to do it. It just won't, and circling each other for 30 seconds, 60 seconds isn't going to do it. So unfortunately, the teams need to acknowledge that we need to have exciting fights in order for the whole thing to work. And I don't want to, put in place rules to limit forks. I would like that to all kind of work itself out. Like the fact that we needed a rule for the bike rack kind of sucks. Like, there was precedent for this. Ghost Raptor in season 1 with the de-icer, they did their little thing with Ice Wave, and they did something with it. The problem with the bike rack was that it was boring to watch. And if you're a TV show which thrives on ad sales, then it has to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, I don't want rules. I don't want any of that. I don't want the shelf. I want sand. I want King of the Hill. I want ridiculous stuff. If in my opinion, the forks are just we're kind of getting down the curve of approaching the most apex battlebot you can create for a square box of X size under this rule set. If I don't know, I kind of want to see it get wacky and be like, all right, here's this hill or the sand or the sand pit or something really crazy. And I mean, as long as we get it in enough time and teams have the chance to design around it, rather than legislating forks, let's create an environment where something other than forks may succeed. So
totally with you.
That's my take on it.
It's really tough because I remember I wasn't like anti Jake and Hydra last year. I said this is sports. Like, it just happens to be that it has now come around to the world of combat robotics, where you see your opponent and you strategize specifically for them, and you're not in violation of any rules, but you know it's not going to make for an entertaining fight, and it's going to you don't know what it's really going to be. But at the same time, I look at the field and how competitive it is, and I just really wish that there was a way to, you can only modify certain things on your bot, like how we have saw blades with the different saws that are attached to it, or any one of the dozens of vertical spinners we have that have a different spinner or drum or whatever the case is. Valkyrie has like 4 different blades, so you can change those depending on the opponent. But where's the line, I guess, as far as what else you can change? So I'm sure it's something that will get visited next year, and you'll probably be part of that discussion. But what's the solution?
I mean,
I don't know. You think about I think it was season 3 when Bronco showed up with 2 robots. It was the first time anyone done it. Everyone lost their minds. It was the end of the world. And they had 2 totally different frames. One was aluminum, one was a titanium frame. It wasn't like they were interchangeable, robots, really. They were specifically meant for 2 different kinds of fights. And then the next year, everyone started showing up with doubles and triplicates of robot parts, and now it's the norm. I'm personally okay with people doing whatever they want, as long as it doesn't slow anything down. There's definitely been stories of teams getting a little too carried away with the configuration wars and dragging things out and effectively postponing fights because they swapped, so I'm going to swap, and then that means that I'm going to swap, and don't do that. But I'm okay with it personally.
And then the evolution of that is that, this team has 2 completely ready robots in 2 different configurations, and then this team has 2 completely ready robots in 2 different configurations. So what are you going to put out? So then that's the next generation of it, and that's already here. I mean, one thing that I think would be cool, but I don't think is reasonable, because I think writing a rule for this is unreasonable, is no configurations, 0. You show up with one thing, that's what you fight with. And this was initially Joe Fabiani from SME, and he was the one who, I don't know if he's probably not the first one to come up with this ever, but he's the one who brought it to my attention. I was like, at first I was like, no, that would stink. And I'm like, no, that's actually kind of cool, because you got to build a robot that can fight anybody and can compete. So I don't know. Like I said, it's hard to write a rule for that, though. It's almost impossible. So I don't know if it's reasonable, but
go. It's a different kind of show.
Yeah. Brandon, what you're speaking of is a world in which all the competitors in the field are 4-wheel drive verts. That is what you are basically speaking into existence, and that will not be tolerated.
I didn't mean it.
Who wins between you two, Hypershock and P1, in an all-out drag race?
That's a tough question. All right, so top speed. Let's go top speed first. We're at 25. Where are you at, Brandon?
Yeah, we're like 23. I think you beat us in a race. However, pause. I have, for the last 2 seasons, brought this because I wanted to do this, and it's never come up. I have specific gearing to change the output sprockets on our robot, so that if they do a bit that has a drag race, we gear to like 38 miles an hour or something. They've never done it.
I might have to do that too.
It's frustrating. I'm like, this would be so funny. But
so the last thing that I wanted to bring up here is that of the 1 and 2 bots that we've seen, we've got Malice, Hydra, oddly enough. There's a few others that some are surprises, some aren't. But do you think that with their 1 win, it was enough to maybe get into the 32? Will?
Hydra feels like a robot that belongs in the tournament. They were number 1 seed last year. They've fought real tough robots this year, and all of that will go into the weighting. Malice had an amazing fight against Blacksmith. I thought that was the most exciting fight of the night, and one of the better fights of the season. And so I would hope that is also weighted in their favor. Again, it's a TV show. We need entertaining fights. So even if you don't have a winning record, exciting fights matter. that's part of the reason why Kraken is so loved, because they're exciting fights, even if they don't win. Same with Blacksmith. Again, 3 fights is not enough to kind of sift through all of that. So time will tell.
Well, this episode was a great fight card, top to bottom. Again, more knockouts than decisions. The decisions, though, were really entertaining fights, like most of them are. And some of the knockouts were jaw-dropping shocks that you just could not believe. You had to be there to see it. But it was the blue square strikes back. More blue squares won than red squares. And it is now time to celebrate a moment we've all been waiting for. The number of winners from the red square is dead on tied with the number of winners from the blue square. 29 and 29. It took us 7 episodes, well, technically 8 BattleBots episodes to get there, but we are tied. So right now there is no advantage for fighting out of the red square or the blue square. How will it end up going into the tournament of 32? But you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Brandon, I missed the mustache. I'm just going to say it again. Like, I was super excited to talk to you and your mustache, but we'll have to put a pin in that other conversation for later.
It'll be back eventually.
And then, Will, you're all smiles and always a good, fun talk when it comes to the world of combat robotics. So again, congratulations on your season so far with one more fight looming. And Brandon, your season obviously finishing up at 2-1. Can't wait to see what the tournament looks like for you guys. So that will do it for episode number 7 of Red Square, Blue Square. A huge thank you to my 2 first-time guests. So for Brandon Zalinsky, Will Bales, I'm Richard Tiemann. This has been Red Square, Blue Square. We'll see you next time.